Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the 2015 Retina MacBook Pro and see how it holds up 10 years later in 2025. Now, what's very interesting was that, at least to me, I personally did own the 2015 Retina MacBook Pro for quite a few years. I owned a 13-inch model for a little bit, and then I switched to a 15-inch model, which was very fun. And then I basically ended up using that 15-inch model until I switched over to my M1 MacBook Pro. So I would say for a year or two I was using that MacBook, and in between I actually did switch over to a 16-inch MacBook Pro that Apple made. I think it was the 16.1 inch, and I ended up switching away from that back to my 15-inch one, mostly because of the fans kicking up all the time. But I really did enjoy my 15-inch MacBook Pro. I thought it was a really good type of experience, and looking at it now, I still think in a lot of ways these types of MacBooks were ahead of their time in some ways, and there were a lot of reasons why people picked up this MacBook over some of the other ones even Apple made after these ones. So we'll take a look at these particular MacBooks and how they hold up in 2025. But if at any point you want to go ahead and buy any of these types of MacBooks, links will be down in the description below. The ones that I would recommend buying this year, you can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of these particular Macs, you have to remember that with the MacBook Pro, right, the 2015 model, this one came out back in 2015, and it came out in two different sizes. It came out in a 13-inch size, which was awesome, and it came out in a 15-inch size as well. So we had two different sizes, and that in and of itself was a really cool thing to basically have there. Now, with the top portion of it, there's nothing really that changed there. It looks pretty much the same. It's a great looking MacBook. You have the Apple logo at the very top. Then you kind of look around it, and this type of MacBook, when you look at the ports, was something that was very, very surprising. This MacBook, right, was basically giving you two Thunderbolt 2 ports, so it was those, older type of styling of ports. It also gave you a USB 3 port. It gave you a couple of those, two of them. It gave you an HDMI port, and it gave you an SD card slot. The I/O right there was insane. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I ended up using my 2015 Retina MacBook Pro for so many years. I just kept looking at it from that standpoint, and I genuinely just couldn't believe how good of a job Apple really, did with the port selection. I was able to use that particular MacBook for so many years, and it was just so nice that I didn't have to worry about carrying an extra dongle around or anything like that. It actually gave me a really good experience from that side, and I was a massive fan of that particular MacBook from that particular situation. Switch over to the 2016 and above, Apple removed that, SD card, and they also removed the HDMI port as well. So those were really annoying things. But then if you fast forward then to 2021, Apple ended up giving us the M1 Pro MacBooks, which ended up giving us a much better type of experience from that side. And that really, once again, changed our way that we basically looked at these types of MacBooks once again. So definitely, in my personal opinion, Apple has done waves of doing really good things with MacBooks and then really bad things. But at least I'm really happy now they have SD cards and they have HDMI ports. But that right there was a very crazy thing that they ended up doing. The 2015 MacBook, held up really well from that standpoint, and I was a massive fan of that when I basically came down to it. Now, as of this point, when we take a look at these types of devices, the other thing we have to kind of keep in mind here is that with these 2015 Retina MacBook Pros, when you open them up, these things came out in two different sizes, a 13-inch size and then a 15-inch size. I would say both these MacBooks from that standpoint, they did a good job at mostly everything you would kind of expect from them. The displays themselves, though, were very good. These were amazing types of displays that Apple just kind of threw in here. And like I've stated before, that in and of itself was another amazing thing Apple kind of had. And if you were about to go through and pick up a MacBook, you were essentially getting a really good type of Mac from these types of devices. These things were going to hold up very, very well from the MacBook standpoint. And the fact that these types of displays still look as good as they did, that was just another one of these really cool advantages that Apple kind of threw in here. So personally for me, once again, if I kind of take a look at these types of Macs, I'm a massive fan of the way they kind of held up from that standpoint. And I still think in so many ways, they're still very good, very beautiful types of Macs that kind of hold up from that standpoint. They're also giving you their standard basically type of, cameras at the front too, so nothing really changed there. But I'm still a massive fan of the way these types of cameras held up from that standpoint. And I think they're very good types of devices when they hold up and they kind of compare from that viewpoint. So personally for me, I would say from the display standpoint, they're very good. And also another big thing too, was that these two Macs were basically going through and giving us the full-size keyboards. this was another really cool thing to kind of have here as well, because what Apple ended up doing here was that they basically went through and they removed that standard type of keyboard for the butterfly keyboards that they made a couple of generations after. That right there was another very, very annoying thing that we all had to kind of go through. And I will tell you from that standpoint too, that was another one of those really annoying things Apple ended up doing. Now, when we kind of take a look at it from now, it's not going to be the biggest deal in the world because Apple switched away from it. But that was just another one of those really annoying things that we kind of had to go through from that standpoint as well. So personally for me, once again, I feel like that's another one of those big things to kind of keep in mind here for the most part as well. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it can be just another one of those minor small things to keep in mind there as well. Now, on top of that, when it kind of comes down to it, when it comes down to kind of the battery life and all those things now, we have to remember that these types of Macs, they don't really, they're not necessarily like the best when it comes down to the performance anymore. And I do think when it comes down to the capability behind them, that's another one of those big things to keep in mind here too. Because these devices aren't really going to be giving you like an amazing type of experience anymore when it comes down to it from that standpoint. They were still good. They were still really good for the most part for a while, but they're just not really worth buying anymore, I would say. Mostly because of the performance and the software updates. These types of Macs just aren't really getting any more software updates anymore, and that is essentially the main problem that we're running into here. When you're taking a look at these types of Macs, these things just aren't really getting any more macOS updates. So I would say from that standpoint, there just isn't really a big reason to go ahead and look at something like these types of Macs anymore when there are some better options when it comes down to it, right? When you're taking a look at some of these types of MacBooks, you should get a Mac that's going to be giving you a better type of software experience. And these ones are already giving you somewhat of like an outdated type of experience. So because of that, I look at these types of Macs, and once again, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to go and kind of pick it up from that standpoint either. Even the performance of these Macs, it's not really doing that good of a job anymore either. And I feel like that's another one of those types of situations that we're running into, right? So I will say from that standpoint, when we're taking a look at it from like a standpoint of like performance and everything, these things were giving you the standard types of Intel chipset. And, it's not like these things were terrible performing MacBooks. They were really good for a while, but any 10-year-old Mac is just going to start showing its age. And that is essentially kind of what's going on when it comes out of these types of devices for the most part. So I will tell you, in my personal opinion, although this type of MacBook still has a lot of power and still is probably worth buying in some capacity, I just don't think this would be a MacBook I'd recommend really anybody to buy anymore. And I do think there are some better options out there for the most part. So in my personal situation, if I'm about to go through and like pick up a MacBook, I do think there are some better MacBooks out there to go ahead and buy. And I just don't think these ones would be the ones I'd recommend buying anymore. Like I said, I think there are far better options out there. And I think that's just kind of one of the big things to keep in mind here. If we're going to go through and pick up a MacBook, that's just kind of just the main way I kind of see it. Now, I think an M1 MacBook Pro at the bare minimum is definitely the one I would recommend worth buying. That's the one I'd recommend a vast majority of people to go and pick up. And then when you take a look at some other MacBooks, like there might be some other ones here and there I'd recommend kind of throwing in. But other than that, in my personal opinion, I just think that there might be some better types of MacBooks to go and buy, and I just don't know if these ones would necessarily cut it in my situation. So from that standpoint, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.